I think we're at kind of a super exciting time at the moment in this field. There's been so many studies showing increased inflammation in patients with depression, both at the kind of population level. So if you just kind of compare depressed patient versus control.
Welcome to the Brains on Brains podcast, brought to you by ECNP, where early career scientists speak with the most interesting experts in applied and translational neuroscience.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jelena Brasanac, a postdoctoral researcher from the Charité University Hospital in Berlin, Germany. I'm also an ECNP Early Career Academy member. It's my pleasure today to introduce you to Professor Carmine Pariante from King's College London. Before we start our conversation, let me just give you a quick overview of his scientific career. Carmine Pariante is a professor of biological psychiatry at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, King's College London, and a consultant perinatal psychiatrist at the South London and Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. He is also editor-in-chief of the journal Brain Behavior and Immunity. His lab investigates the role of stress and inflammation in the pathogenesis of mental disorders and in the response to psychotropic drugs, both in clinical samples and experimental settings. Carmine's work focuses on depression and fatigue, with a particular interest in the perinatal period and in subjects with medical disorders. Carmine is also editor-in-chief of Inspire the Mind, an inclusive digital magazine that focuses on the intersection between mental health, science, and society. His dream is that new therapeutic tools targeting stress and the inflammatory system will soon be available to alleviate the suffering of patients with mental health problems. Carmine, welcome to the ECNP podcast. Very excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to start by taking you to your early research career days. So what brought you to the psychiatry initially, and how did you fall in love with the research? Were there some early influences or mentors that played a crucial role in shaping your career journey?
Of course. So I've always wanted to be a psychiatrist. My parents were both psychiatrists. And so it was a topic or theme on which we talked at home a lot. And I remember reading Freud, for example, when I was in high school and really loving it. So that's always what I wanted to be. And research also, I've been very, very passionate about scientific questions and also how we can improve the life of patients throughout really my career. So I can't even pinpoint a moment where I wanted to become a professor. For example, I guess I always wanted to be an academic. I always wanted to do research in psychiatry and in mental health. I've had really amazing mentors, careers when I was in the US early on at the beginning of my academic activity. I worked with Andy Miller, Emory University. We are now very good friends. He has remained my kind of informal mentor throughout the years. And when I moved to London to the Institute of Psychiatry, I started working with Professor Robin Murray, who also is still at the Institute, and he's been amazingly supportive throughout all of my career there. Actually, I recently received an email celebrating 25 years of my career at King's College London, which has been really the place where I've kind of cemented and then grown my academic career. So, and throughout all of the time, I've had many friends, and some of the people that I met when I was a PhD student or postdoc have remained, my close friends until today. And I think actually academic life sometimes can be really difficult, and it's so important that you create a network of people that you trust and that will support you and that you can support a time of difficulties.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. And I would like to ask, was this something that helped you maybe navigate some transitional periods in your career, maybe when you were moving from Italy to US to London? These mentors and networks, were there something that you would say contributed so much to you feeling part of the scientific community, but also personally that you felt a part of the new city that you are in?
Yes, of course. And, it's when you take an important decision like moving to another university or another city, that's something you want to discuss with people that you trust their opinion, they're going to really only think about your well-being and perhaps had the experience before you. And at the same time, you also want your friends and make sure that your friends stay close to you, even if you move to another place. And that's exactly what has happened to me. So I've been really lucky.
Yeah, and this is something that is very challenging in the scientific life that sometimes can be very nomadic. But in the long term, it seems to be, settled. So you celebrated 25 years in King's College, and probably now you really have your whole scientific family there, where you can contribute to some other newcoming researchers to feel the same way like you did previously.
Absolutely. And over the years, I've been able to kind of mentor and kind of support the career of a lot of early career researchers, which now are in kind of senior position of professors in different places, including at King's College London, but also everywhere in the world. So it's been extremely rewarding to be able to help the next generation of academic researchers in psychiatry. And I think, look, I know I'm kind of an exception to have been in the same academic institution for virtually all of my career. I mean, I was in America. I was at Emory for almost 3 years before moving to London. But since I moved to London, that's where I've been. And I think moving to a different place, it's complicated, and you need to be both pushed and pulled. And I always felt that King's was supporting me at the personal level. I had my friends in London. I was doing the research I wanted to do. I had the freedom to do what I wanted to do. So there was really never, a reason for me to leave. And I think I've been lucky from that point of view.
Yeah. In a sense, maybe that is also shifting in the recent years, that there is more chance for scientists to also spend longer time in one institute where they can have these support systems and networks built and not deassembled and move to another country or another city every two or 3 years. And I think in longer term, it can contribute to better well-being of the academic environment.
Absolutely. And I think, the perception that the scientists must move from one university to another is changing now, because I think we're more recognizing the importance of well-being, but also, recognizing the importance of, for example, women in academia who, of course, moving for them may have additional difficulties. People have families, both, men and women have families. So I think the recognition that there's more to life than just academia. There's a way of being a successful researcher, but also having a good work-life balance. And I think that's very important for me.
Yeah. And also, there is not just one way to collaborate internationally. So you can collaborate today with practically anywhere around the world without necessarily moving to the other place. So maybe one way is also encouraging young researchers, maybe from your group or the ones that are listening to us, that they can also look for opportunities to collaborate with the researchers that are relocated somewhere else without them necessarily needing to relocate from the place they are in today, so that they can still prove that they are collaborating internationally and kind of approving this independence from their PI. I think this is something that all of us maybe feel a certain pressure that we need to, as a younger researchers, also differentiate from our PIs in a sense.
Absolutely. And I think it's crucial that, we as senior PIs, now that I have this role, encourage as much as possible the early career researchers to spend time in at the laboratory, maybe even just through visits or short time kind of training period, and develop their own research project in the context of what they may be doing within the larger lab. Absolutely. And I always found it really an enrichment for us as a research group when, someone would go spend some time in the laboratory and then come back. Absolutely.
Okay, now we are going to talk a little bit about the actual research that you're doing. And one of the most important aspects of this, I think we share, and this is this role of immune system in psychiatric diseases. And there's been a lot of research and new knowledge in the last decades, and you've been at the forefront of it. But now I want to talk a little bit, how do we understand that inflammation plays a role in the subsets of patients with psychiatric diseases, and how can we enhance our stratification efforts to have these subpopulations that may benefit from these new treatments that are targeting immune system?
I think we're at kind of a super exciting time at the moment in this field. There's been so many studies showing increased inflammation in patients with depression, both at a kind of population level. So if you just kind of compare depressed patient versus control, and more so, of course, if you look at, you were saying, a subset of depressed patients that may be treatment resistant, so not responding to currently available antidepressants. And the evidence is building now that people with treatment-resistant depression and who also have increased inflammation may be more likely to respond to anti-inflammatory medication. However, I'm saying, the evidence is building because there have been positive studies, but there have also been negative studies. And at the moment, this could be really the most promising way of stratifying patients or thinking about personalized medicine in the context of psychiatry, something that we're already doing in cancer or cardiology or another condition, then bringing that to psychiatry using blood-based biomarkers. The immune biomarkers may well be at the forefront of the possibility of kind of being used clinically. We, in fact, are really happy that we've been awarded a big grant from the Wellcome that is called Aspire. And the name kind of, explain what we're aspiring to do, which is really to develop a real understanding of how we can use the immune system to identify patients that would benefit from anti-inflammatory medication. And it's great that it's actually a grant built on a network of friends from everywhere in Europe, including, of course, at Charité.
So can you tell us more about the Aspire project and maybe how early career researchers can contribute to this, but also how people with lived experience are also included in all these new efforts, I think now that are starting in psychiatry, probably also in some other area, but the importance also of collaborating with people with lived experience to be included in the research.
Absolutely. So the project started officially in summer of 2024, and it will last 5 years. The first half of the time will be mostly around analyzing existing data sets, so either through meta-analysis of data or bringing together samples, biological samples from clinical studies and clinical trials in patients taking anti-inflammatory medication, so that we can really bring together the largest ever sets of data on what are the immune biomarkers that predict response to anti-inflammatory medications. And then all of that information will kind of be distilled and used to create a proof of concept clinical trial that will be, again, kind of more in the second half of the study. So it'll be 5 years really busy right from the beginning. We want early career researchers to be core of all the study. I mean, we actually have 3 early career researchers as principal investigators and lead of different work packages. And they've been, of course, part of the writing groups and developing all of the ideas. And of course, we hope that more early career researchers in the individual groups that are part of the study can also be associated with the project and spend time on the project. There will be opportunity of learning so many different methodologies from, data analysis and meta-analysis of data, or to cellular and molecular biology and molecular immunology, to clinical trial and clinical assessment. So it's a perfect opportunity, I think, for early career researchers who are interested in this field to kind of, use Aspire for that as an opportunity. And you mentioned, and I'm really glad you have mentioned, the importance of people with lived experience involvement. And we actually had a wonderful relationship with Fanny Lara Mantilla, who is a person with lived experience that is really an expert in the development of project, development and delivery of project. We worked together within a previous EU-funded study called UPERL. And so it was just natural for kind of me and Fanny Laura continue to work together. And then we also brought on board Gamian Europe, which is an association of people with lived experience of mental disorders that supports a lot of research at European levels. And so we have had input right from the beginning when we're discussing the project, when we were writing the project. Fanny Laura was at the interview with us. So, and now even with the beginning of the kind of real delivery, all the decisions are kind of discussed together. And the other important point is that we also have a real interest in public engagement. So a lot of the work that Aspire will do will be publicized through social media, blogs, podcasts like this one, because we think that it is important that we bring this information on the role of inflammation and depression to the wider world, to the scientific community, to the clinical community, and also to the public. And the specific area of inflammation or immune system in depression has been my passion throughout all of my career. I mean, my first paper, was in 1991, which is ages ago, it was already on this topic. So I've always been passionate about this. And there's something about measuring abnormalities in the blood of someone who's suffering from a mental disorder that really brings together mental health and physical health, makes mental disorders really disorders of the whole body, not just the brain, not just the mind, but the whole body. And I think that's quite powerful for people who live the experience, that they really feel that they are as unwell as other people with any other condition. And it's profoundly destigmatizing, I think, for mental disorder. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this.
Yeah, I really can share that insight and inspiration, as I was taught during my bachelor studies that brain is kind of an immunoprivilege, that immune system can not have the effect on the brain. And then during the master studies, you start learning things that are outside of the textbook. And then, everything kind of turns around you. And this is where I, for example, also fall in love with this inflammatory depression or inflammatory model of the disease. And it really inspired me to also go to that field and start working in the kind of this field of him, because it was kind of a different approach, or more holistic approach of mind, body, brain, and
Absolutely.
immune and nervous and the immune system, the psychoneuroendocrinology, where you cannot exclude any system, but you have to look at it together. Yes, it is more difficult, but then on the other way, I also think more inspiring or rewarding. And yeah, for me, this kind of inspiration still stays. So I also moved from animal models to human studies, to clinical studies, but kind of that same spark is there. And I can also recognize this with talking with many researchers, how some ideas or something that they fell in love with very early in their research actually still stays there. So this is very interesting to notice.
Yeah, and I think, again, I think I've been really lucky that I've been able to pursue the same kind of passion, such a specific passion throughout all of my careers. But I always encourage early career researchers that if they have something they fall in love in the research, they should really stick with it. And it doesn't really matter whether it's a hot topic or not, or whether it's, cutting edge or not. The important thing is something they're passionate about it, because they will be spending years on it, and it must be something that they're really passionate about it. Then it doesn't matter. One day, it will become hot topic, it will become cutting edge, and then you'll be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah. I also like that you touch upon all this kind of a synergy of research that's now kind of happening between senior researcher, early career researcher, people with lived experience, but then also branching to like science communication. And this is something that I think is very important, to also bring our science outside of the labs and educate the people for whom we are also kind of doing this at the first place. And that is something that you have quite some experience with. So besides doing the brilliant work, you're also very, I think, gifted science communicator, and you have this effortless way of, talking to people, transmitting the knowledge. So I would like to talk more about this. And I would like maybe that you introduce Inspired of Mind, one of the initiatives that you started, and tell us what is it and what does it make a difference?
Thank you. So 5 years ago, we funded, together with two researchers in my laboratory, Courtney Worrell and Melissa Coase, Inspire the Mind, which is a digital magazine that was initially thought more as a laboratory blog where we could present our research. But then we quite quickly realized that actually there's a lot of people who want to know about all aspects of mental health. It's not only about the recent science, it's about clinical evidence is about the impact of society on mental health, the role of creativity in mental health, lived experience. There are a lot of writers who have lived experience of mental disorders and who wants to write about it. And so it's slowly become like a real magazine where we have both internal writers, so people from the laboratory, people from the university, or we commission pieces from other writers, usually people with lived experience that wants to write about their experience. And in this way, I think we can bring content that is always evidence-based, is always embedded in scientific or clinical evidence, but also is more personal. And we just have lots of fun, and sometimes we publish topics that are a little bit lighter. And our most read piece actually is something written by a researcher in my laboratory on why and how the cat purrs, which is a topic that has attracted a lot of attention. And recently, when Inside Out 2 came out, the movie on exploring emotions during puberty, again, we had a piece on that. But we also have pieces on kind of article that came out from the laboratory on molecular immunopsychiatry. And again, there we're trying to explain in really simple words, complicated kind of concept. And what I like most about it now that we are advanced in doing it is that we are attracting young researchers that perhaps want to have an experience. They may be working with other people in the laboratory, in other laboratory, and they spend a week with us, or they just want to write with us. And we do a lot of editorial support. So we kind of work with them, correct the draft, give them feedback, so that they learn how to write for the public, for the general public. And I think it's a skill that more and more it becomes crucial for every scientist. So, it's really a recommendation, of course, an invitation for everybody, especially career researchers who want to learn or practice how to write in English on their science, in lay terms, to contact us. But, even if you don't write with us, just practice, because it's such an important opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely agree, but I feel that many early career researchers are maybe afraid of that, public talk, or maybe being judged, or the way maybe that they are not the best science communicators. So I don't know, how is your experience, and how do you encourage them? Do you see that people are having a lot of doubts, or they just think of it as something fun?
Well, people are scared, are nervous about it, but in Inspire the Mind, we're trying to make it fun. And so you want to have someone that train you and support you and mentor you through the process, and so that you learn how to communicate both writtenly or orally in lay terms. And sometimes we go through various rounds of rehearsal, and words that we as a scientist immediately understand, something like as simple as neuron or synapse, which of course all of the audience in this podcast will know exactly what we're talking about, but immediately, could have a different meaning, or perhaps not understood at all in the lay public. And it's about learning how to question every single word and every single expression you're using. Would this be understood by a lay person? Would this be understood by a lay person? And then a lot of it is practice. So not being afraid of trying, get correction, trying again, get correction. But it is fun. And I've always wanted to be a writer. So that kind of also allowed me and the people working with me to have fun as kind of pretend journalists. And every week we do meetings where we look at the most recent news and look at the media, we look at social media trends, and decide, okay, well, what do we need to write about it? So it is fun. It can be fun.
Yeah, I find it very refreshing to really have so much of these things that are happening in society and really incorporate them in your lab life or lab work. And I think it's very important for for scientists and early career scientists to get some sort of like media training or social media training, because it can seem that sometimes we have this prevailing discourse in media that is, I don't know, maybe not as scientific as we would hope so, and that people who have like science-backed facts, that they don't contribute to this discourse. Maybe because they're not trained, maybe because they fear of, comments, but all of that I think could be trained. Actually, with this media literacy and starting maybe to write at least those funny articles maybe, but then also the ones that are talking about their own research, and then get trained later on that maybe you are a guest on a podcast, that you're a guest on a TV, and that we maybe as a scientist can also take some more active role in the society, as we could see how important it is, for example, in the time of corona pandemic, where scientists were really brought at the center of attention, and how it matters that you are able to convey the message and science-backed facts to the audience.
Absolutely. And I think, look, all universities and research center will have a press office. And press officers are really good in their jobs, and they can organize trainings, or they can direct you to an organization that does training in kind of public communication. You can definitely ask their help with preparing press releases if you're having a super cool paper that you want to advertise, and also discuss with them any social media problems. I think one of the things that scares people now going to the public is, okay, what if I get harassed or bullied on social media? And I think, this way, of course, it is unpleasant. It's happened to me as well as many other people that I know very well. It is unpleasant, but there's a way of coping with it. And also understanding that, unfortunately, that's one aspect of public communication that can be difficult, but it's something that you can handle with training. So absolutely. And I think the other things I've noticed, certainly in the UK, but I'm sure across, in a lot of fields, is that journalists want to talk to more young voices. They're not, in a way, I'm kind of becoming boring. The journalists rightly so, they don't want to keep talking to, old men. They do want to talk to, young people and new voices. And so I think that's I think that's really a good time for early career researchers to be ready, to be trained, to talk to journalists, to, even go to radio, podcast, television.
Thank you so much for that. I hope that our listeners will take some notes and be inspired, and then maybe they will reach out to you, or at least they can reach to some media department at their university and engage with more of these science communication efforts, because practice makes perfect, I guess. But now I would like to talk a little bit about the psychiatry and maybe the future of the field, or how is it right now. And you mentioned that there are, in other areas of medicine, different efforts to have more personalized treatment, to find a faster way, to find drugs that are working, or intervention that can bring patients to the healthy state. And I just wanted to discuss a little bit how are clinical trials in psychiatry, like long time, considered as a particularly challenging. And maybe can you talk about what are some particular challenges that psychiatry is facing in comparison to the other fields, like maybe oncology or some others, and what are maybe some new ways of doing clinical trials that could maybe help us to find better treatments faster?
Of course. So I think everybody who has had frustrating task to organize and deliver a clinical trial in mental health will know how difficult it is. Every step is difficult. The recruitment, the delivery of the treatment, the incredible placebo effect, which is, of course, important in terms of understanding how and why people improve, but is also a potential confounders. And of course, while the data, the meta-analysis and all the kind of big studies consistently show that, for example, antidepressants are better than placebo. So these, the antidepressants are effective in improving the mental health and the depressive symptoms of people who suffer from depression. This is usually mostly, the signal comes out much more when you put together large clinical studies than when you look at, individual small trial. And so one of the things that, of course, you have mentioned new clinical study or new clinical trial designs, and I'm super, super happy that I'm part of this project, this consortium called PERDIVER, which is led by my good friend Stefan Gold at Charité University, that will use a new design, what is called a platform trial, which means instead of doing small clinical trials, patients can enter a large infrastructures where they could be randomized either to a placebo group or to a number of different active treatments. And this, of course, requires collaboration across multiple centers, and this structure, which is again funded by the Wellcome, will be delivered across many countries in Europe. But it's really a way to speed up recruitment, understanding what are the factors that allow us to predict response to one treatment compared to another's, and collect longitudinal data on a large number of patients, and as much as possible simplify the kind of governance and regulatory environment, which at the moment, unfortunately, also tend to strangle sometimes the delivery of individual trials conducting one in one center or in another center.
I'm very excited about these new platform trials because since I am in this field of psychiatry, I feel we are maybe a little bit lacking behind some other area of medicine that had bigger breakthroughs and better treatments already delivered to their patients. But this kind of gives me like excitement about new possibilities, and also us as a researchers to reimagine ways how to do clinical trials, and also having these bigger initiatives that really bring various European countries together to work together on finding the solutions, because I think also the big problems also ask for bigger teams to be able to answer them. And then again, it gives a lot of opportunity for researchers to connect, but also to involve early career researchers and to give opportunity to develop in that field. And we hope that these platform trials will do something in psychiatry that showed as very promising since Corona pandemic, where this recovery trial served as one of the key moments of finding the treatments for the population. And now for the final part of our podcast, I wanted to ask more about your personal practices. How do you manage your work-life balance? How do you maybe also find way to disconnect from all these different trials and initiatives and work that's done? Because even though it is incredible and amazing, we still need our personal time to take care of ourselves. So maybe you can share with our listeners what are some of the ways that you take care of yourself or your mind and that help you also to have sustainable scientific career.
I have to say that for many, many years, I've worked a lot, maybe too much. And it comes to a point that you realize you need to start looking after your own well-being. Otherwise, you simply don't have the energy to conduct the research and, most importantly, to support the people that work with you. And so for the last few years, I've been really good with physical activity. I run regularly, and I do Kung Fu, which I found both physically and spiritually really interesting. It's taught me a lot about how to keep motivated, how to use values across all aspects of my life, and how to build, again, a network of people that will support you and that you are responsible for, and at the same time they are responsible for you. And I'm also, as much as possible, creative when I can. I do like to write. I've done short movies. A few years ago, about 10 years ago, I did a kind of a course as a movie director. And since then, I've done a couple of shorts. I use my creativity as much as I can. And I think all of this actually makes me a better scientist. So the creativity part really allows me to look at things outside the box, and questions, assumptions, and spin problems on their head in a way that I think I wouldn't be able to do without having, the additional time that I spent trying to create a story for a short novel or for a script. And certainly the physical activity, it has taught me a lot about, especially running and Kung Fu, both of them, has taught me a lot about spending time with myself and the kind of the importance of challenge, of physical challenge, and how to deal with physical challenge, and how to not giving up even, when you're tired or when you're in pain.
How to persist over some challenging periods. And this also is a certain kind of long-term training. And maybe those activities are also something that are similar to kind of also this perseverance that you also need to show throughout your scientific also projects. Because I think there is a certain element of challenge and maybe fatigue of facing certain moments, both in running and also maybe leading a science project, there comes moments when you think you cannot give any more, but when you push through this, then, or when you find a way to face the problem, then you can run even longer distances.
Absolutely. And there's something beautiful about physical activity that you have there's both immediate reward and long-term reward. So you feel your body improving, one run after the other, one physical session after the other. But at the same time, you also see how over months and over years you improve. And that, from that point of view, as I said, as you also said, is the same. It's very similar to a kind of academic career that you work. You try to finish something on that day, and maybe you get better to do it at doing it, but you also have to plan over weeks or months or years.
Thank you, Carmine, so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope our listeners enjoyed too. I'm just going to invite all of you to listen to the ECNP podcast and to follow all the researchers that we interviewed on their social media and get informed about their research. Carmine, thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from ECNP. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the interviewee and do not necessarily reflect the official position of ECNP. The content of this podcast should not be used in any way as the basis for treatment decisions.